So Tinyiko, thank you so much for making time to share your insights into the future of leadership. But before we go into the future, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Where did you grow up?
Well, firstly, thank you so much for reaching out, Nick, and inviting me to be part of this conversation. I must say, in the spirit of full disclosure, this is my very first non-social related conversation, loosely work-related conversation. So forgive me if I ramble, forgive me if I'm not as articulate as I would like to be, but what I can assure you is I'll absolutely speak from the heart. I guess that's comes easy for me because that's part of who I am, to be really authentic. And I guess that segues really well into your question in terms of where I'm from. As I mentioned earlier, I'm a Johannesburg girl, Joburg born and bred. I grew up in the township of Soweto. So for those who are not South African, that's probably one of the biggest townships in Gauteng, possibly even, arguably even South Africa, but I stand to be corrected. I am the youngest of 3 girls. I grew up in a place called Dube. I went to school at a little Catholic convent in Rosebank it had a few name changes, but it was called St. Teresa's Convent. So a big chunk of my formative years was, straddling this world, these multiple different worlds. The one being, a very real township life in Soweto, and the dynamics and the nuances and the amazingness and the craziness and the heartbreak that comes with that. And then the other side is, traveling often 90 minutes every day to a private school, being part of the minority group, as in, a small group of Black children whose parents either could afford to go to that school or through circumstances, were afforded the opportunity to be educated in a public all-girls convent. Surrounded by, I guess, a lot of privilege and wealth, and certainly not home circumstances or home dynamics that I was accustomed to on a day-to-day. So, but it's presented me with really amazing, an interesting perspective on the world that I now see as a gift. So yeah, I own and own my Soweto upbringing, my Soweto experience, and I am a proudly Joburg girl, although I am currently in Cape Town. Yeah.
Right. Now, Tinyiko, can you tell us what was your dream career when you grew up?
I don't think I really had one single dream career, as I'm sure everyone listening can relate to the fact that when you're a kid, your dreams kind of evolve, they change, they shift, but there was always a very consistent theme around creativity. I was always while introverted, I was quite a creative, artistic child, very imaginative. I lived in my head. I always thought I would probably pursue something in the arts, whether it was music, whether it was drama. I loved, the dramatic arts. When I was growing up, my poor family had to be subjected to my one girl plays in the living room. Right. In our little 4-room house. They were subjected to that, all these one woman concerts, because I thought I had the voice of Whitney Houston or something at the time, which was pretty bold. And that's the beauty of being a child, is that there are no limitations. But there was always a very consistent creativity, artistic theme. So I saw myself as an artist, painting or drawing. I saw myself as a musician. I saw myself, I had a knack for public speaking. So it was something that I didn't do. I got involved in almost because I was relatively good at it. You know, so creativity and that sort of thing was kind of always my dream. I had dreams of doing interior decor, anything that had to do with beauty in its many forms and creativity and art in its many forms. I was drawn to, and always
And
have been, and still am.
yeah, and Tinyiko, who inspired you in your early days?
You know, I think I mean, you grow up almost putting, you know, like popular culture stars on a pedestal. So I referenced Whitney Houston. She really was like an idol for me in the 80s and 90s, as was the case for many. But I think inherently, what's always the people that have always been consistently anchoring my motivation and my drive has always been the very people I'm surrounded by. So I grew up in a family of matriarchs who had to step up and step into their power because of circumstances. So, you know, I grew up I mentioned that I was the youngest of 3 girls. So my sisters showed me that there is always better, that you can, through certain characteristics, you know, get out of your current circumstances, that you know, you deserve a seat at the table. You can have the things that you aspire to or desire. My mother was and remains a huge inspiration, because as a woman who didn't necessarily have you know, that consistent male support, she had to, you know, clothe and educate and motivate and inspire 3 girls. Both my grandmothers, my maternal and paternal grandmothers, are both symbolic of the same kind of grit and resilience of being pushed into positions where they have to hold a very, you know, challenging circumstances and families together. So those women are women that I was consistently surrounded by, and whether directly or indirectly, whether consciously or unconsciously, they remain my inspiration
Now,
and my
Tinyiko,
motivation.
yeah, so Tinyiko, looking back over your career today, you are one of the leading marketers in South Africa and across the continent. And looking back over your career, you worked for the past 15 years at South African breweries, Holland Insurance, Standard Banking. Today it's a V&A Waterfront. Can you share a couple of your marketing leadership highlights over those 15 years?
Sure. I mean, firstly, thank you for that, for that acknowledgement. I think I am surrounded by some like really incredible marketers. And while I'm very proud of the work that I produce, I don't necessarily consider myself one of the top marketers, but I do have courage in my convictions. That being said, I think, you know, what's been really, you know, yeah, it's hard for me to say that I've had turning points, because turning points imply that there was almost like a 180 degree, that you shifted direction, went from one path and then had to make a change for whatever reason. And I prefer to see my journey as more of a series of leaps of faith. The first leap of faith was pursuing a marketing degree and entrusting my family's guidance that this was something that was almost the right thing to pursue. The second leap of faith was choosing to, because when I left university, I was offered 2 jobs, both in marketing. One at Unilever, which required me relocating to Durban, and then the other at South African breweries. And I was drawn to the Unilever role because my sisters had worked at Unilever. And I thought, well, you know, it's tried and tested. I know I'll learn a lot and I'd be working on some incredible brands. But equally, there was something really intriguing about the SAB role, especially given the fact that I was a non-drinker and to some extent still am. But I took that leap of faith and decided to pursue my own journey, my own career and corporate journey. And I took the leap of faith and joined SAB. The third leap of faith was about 4 years into my time at SAB. I was probably like 24, 25. My career trajectory was accelerated. I was doing amazing work, working with amazing people, learning, like really, really learning. But I was burnt out. Like I burnt out very quickly because, you know, my job and my role in the organization and the culture, as well as my own innate inherent drive, you know, really required of me to fully, you know, devote myself to it. And I thought, let me just take some time out. And with the blessing of the organization and my really supportive line manager at the time, Andrea Quay, I took a sabbatical year, spent a year in South Korea. I knew I needed to do something that was out of my comfort zone, but that could also pay the bills, because I wanted to come back to South Africa and resume my corporate career. And that was my next leap of faith, is the stint in South Korea, which was an absolute adventure. It was completely crazy. I'm so glad I did it. Would I do it again? Maybe not in the time I'm at the point at which I'm at in my life right now, but at that time, it was the right thing. The fourth leap of faith was, you know, coming back to South Africa, resuming my role at SAB on a different brand, on Carling Black Label, which was amazing because I was part of the repositioning of Carling Black Label, part of the team that, or started part of the Carling Black Label Cup project. But again, I was restless. You don't spend a year in you know, a completely different context and come out on the other side exactly the same. So I just felt like, you know, this was the point at which I should start, you know, flexing my muscles. And I was offered a role at Hollard. Didn't know much about the organization, didn't know much about the brand, but I felt like there was a job to be done. And I felt like I needed to step out of what was a very supportive marketing culture, in that SAB, like, they teach you the method, the technical aspect, the science of marketing. You have entire departments that are solely devoted to making you a better classical marketer. And you've got this entire support structure of like-minded people where you're speaking the same language, you're talking the talk, you're walking the walk. It's high performance. It's a very deeply, you know, deeply involved learning environment. And to just step out of that and kind of see the wood from the trees was a gift in and of itself. And there was some wisdom in me at that time. I may not have known it, but there was some wisdom in me that said, try out, flex your muscles, try something else on for size. So I joined Hollard. It was the opposite of what I'd learned as a marketer at SAB, which was the labor of love that is brand building. This was direct marketing, performance marketing in its pure sense. I mean, we're talking about infomercials that are produced in 2 days that cost a fraction of what a typical, like, Carling Black Label commercial costs, like a fraction. This was about, you know, the dopamine hit that I got at Hollard was the ability to track and measure and to know almost immediately if whatever marketing initiative you put out there was effective or not. I loved that. Like, I fell in love with that. Just knowing that, you know, you put an infomercial out there at some arb time, like 10 o'clock, and you know if people are watching and if they're responding and if what you're saying is resonating. I also learned that I love being in a space that allows me to build something from scratch, or to fix and dismantle and start up again and organize and be really effectively the captain of my own ship to some extent. Whereas at SAB, you were the captain of your brand, but there was a lot of support around you. Not that you didn't work hard and didn't think hard, but there's just something about creating. There's an entrepreneurial spirit that I learned at Hollard that really appealed to me. So I guess it was some of that, as well as the fact that I'd moved out of the typical marketing trajectory from FMCG into financial services, that drew me to Standard Bank. And Standard Bank really was that steep learning curve from a leadership perspective, because historically I had shirked the opportunity to be a manager. I'd managed people, but in like teams of 1 or 2. And I'd always been very proudly, probably naively, the type of person that's like, I don't want to manage people, it's too much work, I just want to do my own thing. And then Standard Bank threw me with the biggest challenge but gift of my career, which was to work and effectively lead a big team and take them along for your journey. So my leadership capabilities were stretched and surfaced in that context. And I could no longer say I don't want to be a manager or a leader, because I was now afforded this opportunity to work with this network of individuals who were looking to me for direction and inspiration and coaching and learning and whatever, all that comes with it. Then my last or most recent leap of faith was after spending time at Standard Bank and doing what I do, which is try it on for size, see it if it fits, see if it works, take what you can, learn, take what works for you and leave the rest behind. I did something that I never thought I would do. I moved to Cape Town. Right. I never thought I would do that because, Cape Town, especially for young Black professionals, it carries a lot of stigma. There's a belief that, it's where you go if you want your corporate career to die. It's where you go if you want to slow down and focus more on work-life balance, more the life side of things versus the balance. People leave at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So there's all these things that I'd heard about, and that it's just, it's quite hostile. That's the perception of Cape Town. But here I am, 2.5 years later, in a role that is currently is allowing me to practice and put in place all the things that I've tried on for size in my 15 years in marketing, all the jackets and coats and hats and shoes, like I'm putting them on, like, oh, I don't want those shoes, like that jacket, that hat, that top, is being kind of, I've put them on to create this whole new outfit in my current role at the V&A Waterfront. And it's those series and those leaps of faith that I guess you could call turning points, plural. But yeah, but for me, they are leaps of faith.
And tell us, Tinyiko, in your current role as the executive head of marketing at the V&A Waterfront, with tourism and hospitality being the hardest hit industry, obviously in these COVID times, how are you navigating these storms? How are you keeping the interest alive in your assets in the VA, and how do you keep people coming?
Yeah, it's a tough one, and I, much like many, Nick, don't have all the answers. But I can say, and it would be disingenuous of me not to say, the V&A, much like every other business, has been negatively impacted by the pandemic and COVID times, given what you've said, in that there is a part of our business that is tourism related. We are the most visited tourist destination, I believe, in Africa, in the continent, certainly within the city of Cape Town. But there's other parts of our business that are less tourism related, but have equally been affected. In the retail space, commercially, our hotels have been affected. As a property development company at a very core basic level, we've been affected. But equally, I think what's allowed us to weather the storm is very much anchored on a clear, well-articulated business purpose. And I was very lucky in that when I joined the V&A Waterfront, it was at a time where the organization was going through that next round of interrogating, why do we exist in the world? Does the world need another property development company or another mall or another landlord, really? What is it that the world needs right now? And being purpose-led for me personally is firstly, not downplaying the pressures of what's happening in the world out there. Like really open your eyes to the discord and the dysfunction and the fragmentation. Then this opposite side of that is the ability to, in the context of the pressure, how are you providing hope? So we articulated our business purposes as that of being more than a property development company, but being a company that develops ecosystems in which businesses and people can thrive. And we do that by being an example of an inspiring and inclusive neighborhood. And you see that what that does is that it's not just inspiring words on a page, but it really gives us permission to look outside of very transactional relationships, whether it's transactional relationships with our customers, our consumers who visit the property, whether it's transactional relationships with the tenants who have gifted us the opportunity to have their dreams and aspirations thrive in this neighborhood. And what it's done in particularly in this particular really challenging period in time is that it's allowed us to look at the human aspect of that tenant-landlord relationship and say, how can we come to the table to support our tenants? And what that looks like commercially or financially is over 200 million in like rental relief to tenants. It's our small business support to the over 500 small businesses that operate in our property. It's providing stipends to the artists and the buskers that provide the entertainment and bring the energy and the artistic flow onto the property and have made it quite successful as more than just another waterfront. Those are all the things that because of our purpose and because of being clear that we are more than just a property development company, we create ecosystems, we connect the dots. That's allowed us to focus on the light at the end of the tunnel, because I don't know how long the tunnel will be, but there is light at the end. And that's allowed us to navigate and adjust and adapt and really think through how we can play a role in keeping people inspired and to some extent enabling some of the survival of the businesses and the people who live and thrive and run their businesses here.
Now, Tinyiko, what would you say is driving you today?
Sure. I think what is driving me today is an acknowledgement that, or an acknowledgement and a belief that my whatever influence and proximity to, in inverted commas, power I may have in my current role, in my current position, I must use it to serve in the service of my team and those who are around me, because representation matters. I believe I am I, much like many, are representative of what is possible, for me to come out of, and my sisters as well, for us to come out of the context and background that we grew up in. I mean, we were struggling financially as a family, living in for my sisters in apartheid South Africa, for me to some extent in post-apartheid South Africa, it was a struggle, So I think just the representation of what is possible, and that all of us deserve a seat at the table and deserve our voices to be heard. I'm not naive to the fact that my role and my position and me in that role, in that position, means something from that perspective. The second thing is, as what motivates me as a leader, the thing that I live and breathe for is seeing that by virtue, because as a leader, I see myself as, yes, as a coach, and to some extent a reluctant mentor, but also as coverage for my team. What was afforded to me very early on in my career was the leader that gave me opportunities to be my best self. She didn't handhold me. She didn't tell me how to do things in a micromanagement perspective. She coached me and threw me into the deep end and said, girl, you sink or swim, but I will be there to catch you. If I see you drowning, I'll be there to catch you. But I'm paraphrasing, but she gave me the opportunity to be my best self. And what she did was she provided the cushioning and the coverage for me to do that. And she dealt with the politics. She, as best as she could, punched away the negativity so that I could be a better version of myself as a marketer. And that's what I believe my role is and my service to those around me is. And then the third thing that motivates me is knowing that, or drives me, is knowing that by being more human, I allow people to relax and not have to worry about, you know, by being more authentically and humanly me. I hope I model that, the same thing, that you can be your most authentic self, even in corporate. Stick to your values, stick to your integrity, and still be relatively successful. So, and seeing and hearing people feed that back to me, to say, like, watching you has inspired me to do X, Y, and Z. I live and breathe for that. Or having a team, seeing a team member flourish and grow and discover new things about themselves and discover their own strengths and their own power, because I gave them that platform, or I enabled that platform to some extent. I live for that. You know, to be able to look at someone and say, my gosh, you've grown so much in 12 months. Or for someone to come to me and say, someone in my team has grown so much in whatever period of time. Oh, I live for that. That's what drives me. And that's what I believe is my service as a leader.
Now, Tinyiko, talking about leadership, and I know it's a big question, but what does the future of leadership mean to you?
Sure. The future of leadership means many things. I don't think there is one right answer. But for me personally, I think what last year surfaced for me were themes that we'd always spoken about. But if anything, what the pandemic has done has dialed up why they are so important in the world. The first thing for me is the power of collaboration and partnership, and leaders that can cut through silos and connect the dots of what might be at a very on face level look like competing or conflicting dynamics, and see where there are opportunities to collaborate and partner. I feel that is one ingredient that leaders need to bring to the table, especially right now. The second is compassion, empathy, whatever you want to call it, compassion, empathy, kindness, not just to others around you, but to yourself. The world needs more of that. I think, you know, leaders need to realize that compassion is not a sign of weakness or showing your vulnerability. It's showing that you are more human and giving others permission to be the same. Compassion is also not about saying, I agree with everything that you do, but it's simply saying, I will, for that moment, put myself in your shoes and understand where you are coming from. And by virtue of doing that, whether we agree or disagree, I've taken a moment to really listen. And which segues into the third thing I think is important for leaders is listening. In this current climate where everything is very black and white and binary, and it's either good or bad or good or evil, and you're either red or blue or this or that, I think we need to be listening more. If you come from a place of compassion and empathy, we need to be able to listen to hear versus listening to understand, and leaders need to be the ones to do that, and that requires a certain amount of humility. Then there's a thing about, I've spoken a lot about purpose and how that's been, as a business, our driving force. So I think that is important for leaders to keep surfacing. Well, why do we exist? Why does the world need us at this point in time? Does the world need another X, Y, and Z? Inclusion is important for me. I think inclusion goes beyond diversity. Inclusion isn't about just simply creating multicultural teams and multicultural organizations, but it's about giving everyone an opportunity to have their perspective on the world heard, because good ideas, bright ideas can come from anywhere, and often they come from people's own personal experiences. So you've got to create an environment that facilitates inclusive dialogue and inclusive discourse if the need be. Then there's two more for me. Change, embracing change. If anything, this year has taught us that you cannot be stagnant. You cannot assume that the status quo will remain as is and unchanged. Embracing change, being anti-fragile versus resistant is important. And then lastly, self-care. We never really talk about how leaders need to look after themselves, and as much as they serve their teams, it's important for you to serve yourself so that you can be a better person, a better human, and a better leader. So those are some of the things that I would say future leadership needs to focus on. And those are things that we've always known, but if anything, the last year for me has highlighted all of that.
And Tinyiko, what would you say, what have you learned from your own journey that you consider most important for building future leaders and to enable and empower future leaders?
Sure. From my own journey, I would say, to see it all as like a marathon versus a speed race. My own journey, every single work opportunity, experience, good or bad, that I've had has only made me a better specialist as a marketer, hopefully a better manager, and hopefully a better leader, and most importantly, a better human being operating and navigating the world. I have learned that, and in hindsight, I wish I had been more present or mindful of this, but honestly, every single opportunity I've had, every single experience has had a cumulative effect and has on my own journey to wisdom and to being more purposeful and purpose-led. So, the ability to step back and step out and zoom out of my current circumstances or my current experiences to feel and take stock of what's happening and what I should be, again, going back to the analogy, trying on for size, taking what I can and leaving the rest behind, has been really important in my journey. Every experience is there for a reason, even if it's bad. Don't completely block it out. If there's trauma, deal with the trauma and deal with trauma as you should, because there's trauma in corporate. Let's not get it twisted. It's not all sunshine and rainbows. People have had traumatic experiences in corporate environments, but also have had really beautiful experiences. From both of those, extremes, take the lesson out of it and add it to your toolbox and move forward. The second thing that I've learned is about relationships, and building really genuine, authentic relationships and surrounding yourself with, creating a tribe for yourself. I am an introvert through and through. So for me, I don't work, I'm not a natural work the room networker. I don't, work the room networker. It doesn't come naturally to me, but I build bonds. My circle is small, but it's tight and it's high value. So find your tribe and find like-minded people and build relationships, and really authentic relationships, and and carry them with you throughout your journey. Yeah, so I think those are some of my learnings.
And Tinyiko, when you speak to aspiring leaders, what is it that you tell them about social media? How should they navigate social media to build their own leadership brand?
Yes, I'm assuming this question is for those who feel compelled to have some kind of presence on social media. And to that I say, firstly, ask the question whether or not you're ready. Like, is this the platform that I want to put myself out there? And if it doesn't feel right at that moment in time, do not feel the pressure to be on social media because you feel everyone's on it, therefore I need to be on it as well. And I need to be everywhere and saying a lot of stuff all the time, because what you'll do is, what may happen is you will burn out, and how you position yourself may come across as inauthentic. So firstly, ask your question if you're ready for it, if you're ready for it and if it's the right thing for you. The second is, what is your perspective on the world? Like, what do you want to put out there? What do you want people to take out of whatever message you're putting onto your platforms? The third thing is choosing the right platform for you. Because, I mean, personally, my personal brand shows up more publicly, maybe on LinkedIn, and my private brand shows up privately on other platforms, Instagram, etc. Maybe in 6 months or a year's time, I may open myself up to more public exposure on some of my other social media platforms. But for now, that's not going to work for me. That's not what I want. So I'm not going to do it. And what I do share on LinkedIn, I do so in a way that feels right for me at that time. If I have something compelling to share, I will share it. But I'm not on a hamster wheel. When I feel ready to be more, overt, and I will do that when it's the right time, because I know when it feels right, then I will put my best foot forward. Right now, it doesn't feel right. So that's my recommendation, is if it feels right and it's the right thing for you, and you're not doing it because of you feel pressure to do it, and you have something to say, to put out into that world, then create your social media strategy, understand the platforms, what is your messaging, what is the brand that you want to put out there, but most importantly, make sure that it's anchored on your purpose and your authenticity, because people can see right through it when you are just trying to be something that you're not. That's the thing with social media, is that it people show their best selves, but also it exposes the cracks in your Achilles heel, especially if you're not being authentic.
Right. And Tinyiko, what is your advice to future leaders in terms of challenges? What are some of the biggest challenges they should expect to encounter in their career?
I believe that it is a couple of things. I think you've got to embrace the fact that leadership can be lonely. It is not a popularity contest,
Oh.
and sometimes you will have to make decisions or do things that people may not understand. But take heart in the fact that if it comes from a place of integrity and for the greater good, and you've looked at all scenarios and it's the right thing, while it may not be the popular vote, you got to have courage in your conviction, and sometimes that can be a lonely place, because everyone has a different vantage point on which they're viewing the world, and as a leader, you've got your vantage point should be one of a more holistic, broad spectrum, where I hate to use this analogy, but it's kind of like chess pieces on a chessboard. Some people are only seeing one little piece. Your role and your obligation is to see the board in its entirety. And sometimes that means making moves that people won't understand at that point in time. So, or you may reflect on and think, oh, I shouldn't have done that. Either way, an understanding and an embracing of the fact that leadership can be lonely at times. So you've got to, in the spirit of self-care, find your tribe of people that can understand your experience, because they're in a similar situation, maybe not in the same environment, but they understand the dynamics. That could be a therapist, that could be coaching, that could just be your peers, peers in other organizations that are in leadership positions that have to deal with these nuances and dynamics. Leadership can be lonely.
And Tinyiko, if you were to design a curriculum for future leaders, what are some of the new skills you would want to factor in?
I would say, I'm not even really going to call it new skills, but I think there's a big theme about going back to basics, and to create more consumer orientated, human centric experiences. We speak a lot about the fourth industrial revolution and new technology and innovation, and I'm not being dismissive of all of those. But for me, those are an aid and there to enable more human experiences, and creating more consumer-centric human experiences is really the crux of why, marketers exist, to obviously draw people to your product or your service by making them feel like it belongs to them, like they deserve it, that it's the right thing for them. And often that goes back to scratching just how do human beings behave and think and feel, and you've got to have a certain amount of EQ and a lot of compassion and empathy to do that. And I think that's why I feel like going back to basics is really the crux of it. Like, really understand the consumer, not just the journey, but human beings and how they operate and how they think and how they navigate the world. It's partly something that happens intuitively. It is also a skill. I was lucky very early on. I mean, when I joined SAB, when I made the decision to join SAB, I was thrust into the consumer insights market research team. That was my first working stint. And honestly, I was disappointed because I thought I would work on a big brand and blah, blah, blah. But it was honestly the best thing for me, because it taught me that foundationally, for anything, whether it's marketing or finance, or you've got to understand people. And I was taught the methodology of getting as close to that as possible. And then I filled in the blanks through my own observations, but my own experience. And that skill of really going back to basics and understanding human beings and having compassion and empathy for what people are going through, either through your skills and your training and data and analytics, or own experience and research and an observation. That is, for me, a really, really important skill that future leaders need to dial up in the world today.
And as a mentor to future leaders, Tinyiko, can you maybe share a success story where you mentored an upcoming leader and that person took your advice to heart?
Yeah, I mean, I gotta say that anyone's success and growth is a combination of things. And I'm acknowledging the fact that there are many of us and many people, and the individual themselves has had a role to play in their growth. But I also acknowledge that to some extent I've had my own influence on individuals, either as a leader or as a mentor. And a very recent example is of someone in my team who reached out to me very early on when I joined the organization to be a mentor. And I was like, it's still early days. I did that whole thing, reluctant, like, are you sure? But anyway, long story short, we've been on that journey, and this person, the first advice I gave them is, leadership isn't about the title. It's not about your positioning in hierarchy, and it's not about managing people. You don't need to manage a whole entire team of people. You can be a leader in your own right, in your current capacity and in your current role. And what that means for me is beyond being a team player, but being a supportive member of the team to your peers, either those that are at the same level of you, above or below. You can be inspirational and supportive to anyone in your current role. And being a supportive team member and having your teams back, your team members back is a critical, important part of self-leadership. The second thing we spoke about was the importance of, even if you don't know, just try, just try, put your best foot forward. Whatever, if it's a brief that you're writing, give it your best shot. And then bring it back to me and we can work through it together and finesse and refine it. But always give it your best. Be diligent, show your work ethic, show commitment. And then the third thing is be in a constant cycle of curiosity and learning, whether it's learning through myself or it's learning through your peers or other people in other departments. Get curious about the world around you, and then use that curiosity as fuel to inspire you to deliver and practically deliver better work. I think marketers can stand themselves in good stead when they do become more curious about the world around them, and then apply that curiosity in their day-to-day. And the last thing I said is, you deserve to be here. You may face imposter syndrome, which we all do at some point, but you deserve to have your voice heard. And sometimes that means, speaking up at the boardroom table. Sometimes that means giving your perspective on, whether it's creative work or, strategy. Stop trying to box yourself into, I'm not a strategic person, or I'm not a creative person. Are you a human being living in the world? Yes. Okay, then you have a perspective on it. You must have a perspective on the world. Share it, because you can unlock other people's thinking and perspectives on the world that they never considered. And the greatest gift for me out of that experience with this individual was hearing from other people like, oh, so-and-so, she's really come into her own, or so-and-so has really stepped into her light. And then hearing from her saying, my gosh, I feel so much more confident to speak up. And then seeing her this person in action in a room, literally owning the room and, directing and I don't even have to step in and facilitate this person. Oh my gosh, greatest gift. And I guess you could say that is a success story in and of itself. And I'm so humbled to have played some role in that, because that's the feedback that she's given me, is that you gave me permission to step into myself, to grow into my light. And you said to me, you are a leader, be a leader right now. And that's been a game changer. So I have goosebumps just thinking about it, because I have other stories of people that have said the same thing. And this is partly what I think my purpose is right here and right now, to create more of those moments for others.
And Tinyiko, looking back over your leadership journey and maybe your learning journey, who are the kind of role models of leadership that you would recommend future leaders should study and learn from?
So firstly, I think you should study and learn from anyone who resonates with you and who you relate to. I think it should feel right for you, because that person or that individual aligns to your own value system, and there's something in the experience that you believe will add value to your life. I think you should learn from people who can challenge you, or you should at least have the opportunity, give yourself the gift of learning from people who may not hold the same views and beliefs, because there's learning in that. I think you should learn from people who may not necessarily be in leadership positions per se, but you can learn from your own peers. I learn from my own team, the people who report into me, the people who report into other people, who report into me. I learn every day, because going back to my earlier point, everyone has very different perspectives on the world. So that's the one thing I gotta say up front. For myself personally, I would, I follow and learn from my own peers, people that I grew up with in the marketing realm, in inverted commas. People like Nontokozo Madonsela is currently the CMO of Momentum. Her and I, worked together for many years. Our paths crossed again years later. We are good friends. Our relationship evolved into friendship, but I still am able to take out of our relationship a lot of things that have a very professional, has professional wisdom. The second person that I follow and I learned from is Musidi Seretlo. Musidi was she was that line manager that was sink or swim, but if you drown, I got you. She really helped me step into my own light and really have courage in my convictions and really flex my marketing muscle. And she's now moved out of the corporate rat race and has started a marketing consultancy business. But I enjoy following her content and her rhetoric because she balances marketing learnings with very personal, raw experiences of her corporate experience, and how she is rising up into being a better version of Musidi without having to necessarily use the label of CMO or marketing director and running the corporate rat race to define and validate herself. So I feel like that's a beautiful balance. So the other person is Pride Maunatala. Pride is also a good friend of mine. We were both baby brand managers at SAB. I have a lot of respect for her, not just as an individual, but as a friend, but also as a marketing specialist, a guru who's very strategic. The ability, I think, the power of marketers, and I believe marketers can be the next CEOs. I really believe that. It's not just chartered accountants that can run organizations. I think marketers who are classically trained and understand the power of connecting the dots, and can zoom out and zoom in and zoom out and zoom in and see things holistically, are primed to be the next CEOs. But anyway, Pride for me embodies a lot of that, in that she's a great marketer, but she's also an amazing strategist. So those are just some of the people that, and Heidi Brower. Heidi was also another one of my line managers. She's CMO at Hollard, amazing, passionate, intuitive gut marketer. And Andrea Quay. Andrea Quay was another one of my line managers at SAB. She was head of CMO for SAB AB InBev. She's since left, but also an incredible technical marketer, and really understands the classical marketing space. So those are some of the women who I follow and respect and would recommend, and their work aligns to my values. They feel right. I respect everything, what they say, and yeah, those would be some of my recommendations.
Well, it's a small world because both Heidi and Pride have been on the Future Leader Forum, and the insights
really?
on the site. So that's great. Thank
you.
The
world is a village. The world is a village.
Absolutely.
Those are my people.
Thank you. People. Thank you, Tinyiko. Now, how can our listeners connect with you, and where should they follow you?
So, I mean, I alluded to it earlier. The best place to if you are interested, is to connect with me on LinkedIn. My profile is public, and I share a lot more so from a V&A brand perspective and our initiatives, but every post I make, it's well considered, it comes from the heart, and is an insight into my own personal beliefs. So LinkedIn is the right place to connect with me for now. When I'm ready to be more public on other platforms, I will share, but for now, LinkedIn is the right place.
Okay, now last but not least, Tinyiko, is there one piece of advice that you would really like to convey to future leaders that they should implement in their own leadership and their own life?
Oh, okay. I would say that it's all a journey. We're all trying to figure it out. Even some of the most celebrated leaders are on their own personal journey. and that journey has taken them years and years and years, and it's been years of successes and celebrations and failures and trial and error and this and that that's gotten them to that point, and there will be more years to come for the same thing to happen. So, you know, don't be so hard on yourself. You don't have to have all the answers right here and right now. But what I would say is give yourself the gift of being present to each and every one of your experiences. Be present, be mindful. Occasionally step back out of your current situation and take stock of what's happening around you and document your learnings and what you want to try on for size and what you want to leave behind, and then move forward, because it's really a journey and you got to be present for it, because every experience is a gift. So give yourself the gift of being or permission to firstly not be so hard on yourself, but secondly be present to your life, be present to your life experiences, take what you need and leave the rest behind on your journey.
Well, Tinyiko, thank you so much for sharing your insights and your wisdom into the future of leadership, and reminding us that we need to be present and we need to trust life, and we need to take these leaps of faith, as you put it, so many times in our life and in our career.
Thank you so much for having me. This was an amazing opportunity for me to also just reflect, and thanks for kicking off my 2021 on a high.
Thank you. You're most welcome.